Indiana's own for 30 years, Wish TV. After MASH and domestic life will not be seen tonight, so we may bring you a Wish TV special. Indiana's own for 30 years, a television celebration.
Good evening and welcome to A Birthday Party, a television celebration of Channel 8's 30 years on the air here in central Indiana. Hi everybody, I'm Mike Ahern.
And I'm Debbie Knox. In the next hour, we'll take you back over 3 decades of local broadcasting by Wish TV, and we'll show you some rare film of our early days in television.
Including, Debbie, we have some extraordinary footage of a Beatles concert here in Indianapolis at the State Fairgrounds Coliseum exactly 20 years ago this month. And how our photographer managed to get this rare film is a fascinating story in itself. You'll hear that too.
You know, Mike, we've chosen what we think is an especially suitable place to hold our celebration, the Marott Ballroom. Back in 1954, when Channel 8 first went on the air, the Marott was considered the queen of the city's hotels. So today, as we mark our 30th anniversary, the Marott has been returned to that grandeur through a remarkable restoration project.
And back in 1954, there was another building, or really a complex of buildings, making big news here. Everybody's attention also was centered on the new Glendale Shopping Center, under construction on the Indianapolis North Side at that time.
You know, if we were to do a newscast in 1954, here, as we say in television, are the headlines of that year.
In the news tonight, the Army McCarthy hearings are nationally televised, and they lead to Joe McCarthy's downfall.
In Indianapolis, the Civil Liberties Union is denied access to the World War Memorial Building.
In Washington, the Supreme Court rules public schools desegregation, and in the United States, and the segregation must be abolished in this country.
School children get their first shots of the new Salk polio vaccine.
In sports, Roger Bannister became the first man to run the 4-minute mile.
Willie Mays leads the New York Giants to a World Series sweep.
And in Indiana, Bobby Plump leads Little Milan to the state high school basketball title. Or just like that.
And Bill Vukovich wins his 2nd straight 500.
That year's Oscar, by the way, went to the film From Here to Eternity.
And that year's best-selling book was The Power of Positive Thinking by Norman Vincent Peale.
And on television, you would see such programs as Show of Shows, Studio One, and Edward R. Murrow in See It Now.
You know, if we were to run a commercial back in 1954, we'd tell you about a place called Fairway Furniture where you could buy a 7-piece bedroom set for about $99. It's true.
A bargain at twice the price.
That's right. You know, we've been talking about 1954, but the beginnings of television date back much further than that.
Okay, let's begin the celebration tonight by briefly tracing television's early years. We're going to take you back a long way now to the music of Glenn Miller and pictures of post-war America. America in the middle of the 20th century. It was a time of post-war prosperity. The nation was living it up after doing without for so long. This was the era when Americans would be swept up by a wave of technology, when a piece of living room furniture with a window to the world began to change our lives. While it may seem that television is a relatively recent invention, nothing could be further from the truth. Back before the Depression, TV experiments were being conducted in the hope of sending live motion pictures through the air. In fact, the first TV transmission of the image of a person was achieved as early as October of 1925 by an English inventor named John Baird. Now, what he did was he bribed a 15-year-old boy to pose in front of a camera. And then that makeshift primitive broadcast unit crackled and popped and finally beamed the image of that boy the astonishing distance of 10 feet. That same Englishman, just 3 years later, sent the first color image to a rudimentary color receiver. It was a crude but rather lifelike rendition of blue and red scarves, red roses, and a man sticking his tongue out. During that same year in the United States, you could buy the first commercially produced black and white televisor from the Davin Corporation for $75. Of course, you couldn't see much on it. That was well before TV service was established, even in New York City. W9XMT, that station may not have brought you I Love Lucy or anything else worth remembering, but it was important here in Indiana because that was the first experimental TV license granted in the state. It was in the mid-1940s, and it went to the Mallory Company, operating on Channel 3. While it wouldn't be much to watch now, the test pattern it transmitted was one of the first on the airwaves in this state. By the early 1950s, TVs had begun to creep into the homes of average Americans. And if your family owned one, you could count on never watching TV alone. By this time, the first television commercial had already aired in the U.S. in 1941. CBS, NBC, and Dumont were well-established TV networks, and there were already 2 commercial television stations in central Indiana. Dave Smith, a pioneer in Indiana television, a professor of broadcasting, and former WISH employee, remembers that in 1951, viewers were hardly discriminating about what glowed on their screens.
We used to sign on about 2 o'clock in the afternoon. The programming didn't start till 4. We would sign on at 2 with a 2-hour test pattern and tone signal, okay? We used to use for the test pattern an Indian head with his war bonnet on, you know.
I remember that, yeah.
For some reason or another, the engineers decided to change and put the regular circular test pattern on. 2 or 3 days later, we were flooded with mail saying, "What happened to the Indian? Bring the Indian back. We want the Indian." In those days, the test pattern got fan mail.
By 1953, the nation was receiving a steady diet of situation comedies, variety shows, and news, almost all of it live, through the air. TV was beginning to influence how we spent our time and what we looked at. In living black and white, we watched history pass before us.
But Pat and I have the satisfaction that every dime that we've got is honestly ours. I should say this, that Pat doesn't have a mink coat, but she does have a respectable Republican cloth coat. And I always tell her that she'd look good in anything. And you know, the kids, like all kids, love the dog. And I just want to say this right now, that regardless of what they say about it, we're going to keep it.
It seemed that TV's version of the American way of life was everywhere on our dials. The Adventures of Ozzie and Harriet premiered in 1952, and we watched and laughed as Dave, Rick, and their parents provided a glimpse of everyday life in TV land. Television families in the early 1950s supposedly had the same problems as you and I, only they rarely failed to solve their dilemma by the time closing credits rolled. I suspect one reason may have been the television families of the early 50s didn't have the distraction of TV watching to contend with.
Which Whopper is your Whopper? Because we'll give it to you our way, or we'll give it to you your way. We'll give you more of a good thing, or turn around and give you less of a good thing. We'll make it with everything, or nothing, or somewhere in between. That's because when you choose Burger King, one good turn deserves another.
Have it your way at Burger King now.
It's backed by popular demand. Yeah, the incredible Wednesday-only sale at Value City Furniture. Thousands of furnishings have been drastically reduced for this Wednesday-only sale. Living rooms from $2.98, bedrooms from $3.98, dining rooms from $5.98, and recliners for only $78. This Wednesday only, and only at Value City Furniture. Don't come Thursday because you'll miss the sale.
This Wednesday, 9:30 a.m. to 9:30 p.m., Highland is having a fantastic 12-hour brand name sale featuring thousands of bargains. Like this JVC wireless remote 14-day programmable VCR, just $526, save $73. A Tappan 30-inch gas or electric range, just $252, save $37. And this Pioneer car stereo with free normal installation, just $94, save $25. But hurry, you only have 12 hours this Wednesday at Highland. Everything you never expected from an appliance store. Nature has given the human body a wondrous power, the power to heal itself. But nature does take time. That's why Band-Aid brand is so important. It helps nature heal cuts faster. Research by Johnson & Johnson proves that by keeping your cuts covered, your body heals faster. Covered cuts, in fact, heal up to twice as fast. So give nature a helping hand with Band-Aid, and your cuts will heal up to twice as fast. From Johnson & Johnson.
1, 2, 3 o'clock, 4 o'clock, rock. 5, 6, 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, rock. 9, 10, 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock, rock. We're going to rock around the clock tonight. Put your glad rags.
By the mid-1950s, America was on the move. The world was once again safe for democracy, and teenagers were discovering a new form of music that would shape their generation and others to follow. By now, televisions were as commonplace as the radios they were replacing. TV, it seemed, was not a fad after all. As viewers' appetites for programs grew, so did the number of TV stations that could satisfy that hunger. And so it was in 1954 that this building, the Riddick Building, now with a new look, became the home of WISH-TV. It had already been the broadcast facility for Wish Radio for several years when Indiana Broadcasting was granted a license to televise. Soon the larger, empty studios in here would come alive with lights, camera, action as Channel 8 went on the air. Staffed mostly by former radio personnel, the infant WISH-TV, as with most television stations of that era, had few TV veterans to help chart a course through the early days of broadcasting. Technology was evolving fast in television, and equipment was hardly time-tested or 100% reliable. The watchword of the day was innovation. That went for local programs as well. Since videotape recording was still a test tube technology, local shows were virtually all broadcast live as they happened. And any event that happened at a reasonable time in a place accessible to TV cameras became a guinea pig for adventurous television producers. Network producers in this decade tried to plan a program menu large enough to satisfy the growing number of viewers, although we watched almost anything beamed into our homes. Then, as now, an easy target for TV was the passing parade of events in the world around us, such as the 1956 Democratic National Convention. In this year, the networks would mobilize their cameras and crews to give America a first-hand look at the process of picking a presidential candidate and denying a vice presidential hopeful.
I hope that this convention will make Estes Kefauver's nomination unanimous.
The shark bait has such teeth, dear, and it shows them pearly white.
By the late 1950s, we were a nation on the verge of a new decade and about to realize the promises of the space age. John F. Kennedy was no longer the young man from Massachusetts, and television was emerging from its golden age. America was watching shows like Leave It to Beaver, Dennis the Menace, Rawhide, The Donna Reed Show, and the list goes on. By this time, Channel 8 was a well-established part of the broadcast community in central Indiana. We became the proud owners of one of the very first videotape machines in the country in 1956. And that, as history will record, was the beginning of the end for most live television. It would, of course, never vanish completely because there are some events that are somehow more dramatic when you know they're happening right now, just on the other side of town.
Come on, let's go to the house. Let's go, go!
And so it was that what we now call the golden age of television came to an unnoticed close. Not only was what we were watching changing, but also what we were watching it on. TVs now had a sleeker, more futuristic design. Gone were the days of the well-made furniture look when television was young.
Ridges. Ruffles have that extra something more taste rich and rich.
The ridges don't just make Ruffles prettier than regular potato chips, they make them taste better. They're like flavor curves that give Ruffles potato chips all that extra taste.
Ruffles have that extra something. Ruffles are ridges. Ridges above the rest.
From Frito-Lay.
They said it's coming, a third of a pound. It's new McDonald's, nothing like it around.
New cheddar bells.
The sauce is cheddar, grilled onions too, on a toasted rye bun from McDonald's to you. It's big, it's bold, see for yourself. It's a good time for the great taste
Cheddar Melt
of McDonald's.
New cheddar melt.
Come and try a free sample size of our new Cheddar Melt sandwich. Taste how big and bold a sandwich can be. McDonald's new Cheddar Melt. Try a free sample today.
We are Pepsi-free, caffeine-free.
Now Diet Pepsi-Free has NutraSweet. Life just seems to get better and better.
Diet Pepsi-free.
Diet Pepsi-Free just added something they call NutraSweet. I call it terrific.
Diet Pepsi-free.
Diet Pepsi-Free with NutraSweet. Everything in life should be this good.
And all that taste is caffeine-free.
Terrific.
We are Pepsi-free.
Regular and diet.
Take a sheet of Reynolds wrap, fold it in a Reynolds flap. First add meat, add your spice. Fold it once, fold it twice. Bake it now at 450. Not long, 15 minutes or so. Now take a peek, and you'll see just how good your meal can be. Because with a sheet of Reynolds wrap, a little thought, this Reynolds flap, you'll soon see what you can do. Chicken or fish and vegetables too. It seals in goodness, seals in flavor. So do yourself this little favor. Make cooking better in a snap with a sheet of Reynolds wrap.
By the time the 1950s were fading and the 60s had begun, we as a nation were unprepared for the turmoil which would describe this decade. Of course, there would be the good times, the times during which one of America's most popular presidents would preside. Television by now was bringing the world into our living rooms at an ever-increasing pace. And what we saw on the screen would influence us more than any observer of the day might have guessed. The televised 1960 presidential debate between JFK and Richard Nixon would temporarily halt Nixon's trip to the White House. Historians will later say that Americans saw something in Nixon's face they were uneasy with. During the dawn of this decade, Channel 8 kept pace with the industry, providing local programming throughout the day, 7 days a week. Richard Hickox anchored the 4 short newscasts of the day, giving viewers over 30 minutes a day of live local news Monday through Friday.
And the president is doing something to help to supply food for a flood of Cuban refugees who have entered this country. A multi-million-dollar aid program being set up. It will provide jobs, homes, food, schooling, and health care for about 66,000 who fled the Castro regime. On the dark side, the number of workers drawing jobless benefits climbed to a record high in the week which ended January 21st.
And this was a long way from news just 5 years before.
News at that time was a loss leader. I mean, you did it because of the brownie points with the FCC.
The government said we had to do news.
Well, the FCC liked for you to do news. You know, they might frown if you didn't, so we did it. It was kind of an obligatory thing, but you didn't expect to make money. It cost too much. And when I joined the station in 55, we had a grand total of 3 people in the newsroom. We had 2 photographers and an on-the-air anchor.
Hello, everyone. everyone, and say, boys and girls, better run get mother because it's time for Passport to Beauty.
During the early 1960s, the popularity of a Channel 8 fitness show was soaring, and the hostess, Debbie Drake, was making her mark on the history of television in Indiana. She was the original TV exercise girl, and women, children, and most probably a few men huddled around their RCAs to watch one of the first television exercise shows in the nation.
Walk around several blocks, and you'll feel much better than overindulging in extra pastries and breads and fattening foods. Well, right now, let's do a warm-up. And our hands in front, and then touch behind, and stretch, and relieve the tension in your neck and shoulders, and limber yourself up in preparation for more exercises we'll be giving you later on. And
Debbie came on the TV scene in 1959, and her Debbie Drake show could be seen weekday mornings for years thereafter.
A friend of mine had to trade these in on a new set.
Another popular Wish personality then was Selwyn, a movie host who first appeared on the Fright Night show.
Friday night is Fright Night on Channel 8.
A space age show, and then an adventure program hosting Tarzan and Jungle movie reruns. Selwyn would entertain us until 1964 with his TV gimmicks, off-the-wall humor, and very poor puns.
Oh, good evening. I was just checking my cell Winchester.
While Debbie was keeping Channel 8 viewers fit and Selwyn was keeping them laughing, another audience was turning their dials to Wish TV. This was Dick Summers' Saturday Afternoon Rhythm Carnival, a weekly show for teenagers who could kick off their shoes and cut a rug in Mom and Dad's living room with the TV blasting out the sounds of the 60s.
He did the Monster Mash.
About the time America was putting its first man in space, the networks endeavored more than ever to fill the programming day with must-watch TV shows. Many of them would survive to the present, living out their off-network lives in the land of reruns.
A horse is a horse, of course, and no one can talk to a horse, of course. That is, of course, unless the horse is the famous Mr. Ed.
Wilbur, you're a dream. Wow, look. I wish Wilbur and his friends would keep quiet. With all that noise, how can a horse write his diary?
You're 8 miles from your nearest neighbor. You overrun with skunks, possums, coyotes, bobcats. You use kerosene lamps for light. You cook on a wood stove, summer and winter. You're drinking homemade moonshine, washing with homemade lye soap. And your bathroom is 50 feet from the house, and you ask, should you move?
Yeah, I reckon you're right. Man, be a dang fool to leave all this. There are many ways to travel Route 66, some of the most exciting of which aren't even on the highway.
You mean like the time I tested the hydroplane?
If you dig that sort of thing.
How sweet it is. Oh, these are my write-ins. This is grueling work.
One thing is for sure, that I'm going to be just myself. Because I believe that if a man has a certain character, he should keep to that character. Because it is the intelligent thing to do.
Whoever the man in the funny hat was, he was sure to bring a smile on Tuesday nights.
A lot of people get the love of faith like mine, you know. And anybody deserve to be shot. Who would ever try to change a face like that? So, I'm just going to sit here and be completely honest with myself. And whoever I am, that's kind of what the show's going to be like. Oh, well, check me out, boys, will you? Okay, blast off. Everything's go, 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 go.
When lively folks work up a thirst, you'll hear them ask for Pepsi first. They choose the right one, the modern light one. Now it's Pepsi for those who think young.
One other piece of memorabilia from this era is this series of Pepsi commercials that aired in the early 1960s on Channel 8. They were some of the most progressive spots of their day, and they set a style for future commercials which imitated and followed their lead.
When you say Pepsi, please, you're putting yourself among people who like their leisure with Pepsi, the drink that's young. So go ahead and pick the drink that lets you drink young as you think. Yes, get the right one, the modern light one. Now it's Pepsi for those who think young.
I'm Priscilla Presley, and when I thirst for color, I quench it. And when I thirst for moisture, I quench it. When your lips thirst for attention, give them Quench Your Lipstick.
I picked up this bulletin about PMS, premenstrual syndrome, from my doctor. And I learned what I can do for real relief. I can take Primusin PMS, maximum strength for the symptoms of premenstrual syndrome. Primusin PMS.
Listen, if you're involved in a long-distance romance, I gotta tell you something. Sprint has something you're gonna love. Volume discounts. You save from your first call, of course. And then when you spend $25 a month, and you know you will, you save even more. And it keeps going like that. Sprint's volume discounts are perfect for guys like us who didn't happen to fall in love with the girl next door. Call Sprint. Find out about it.
Why concerned babies would rather be born at St. Vincent Hospital.
Being a baby is a full-time job. I even work lots of nights. To get a good start in life, we recommend St. Vincent. Because if there's a problem, they've got the answers right there. Yeah, that's why St. Vincent is a great place for a birthday.
The new St. Vincent Family Life Center, opening in the fall.
We treat you with special care. Oh, goody.
When you invite a man out to a nice place for lunch, you really mean it.
May I show you to your seat, sir? This is our most popular patch of sunshine.
Let's start with a drink.
Diet Pepsi?
Diet Pepsi. Great taste with NutraSweet.
I'm sure it'll be to your liking. Yes?
Yes. To everything, with no reservations.
You don't need reservations, sir.
Taste improved by Diet Pepsi.
Us, there are certain memories that mark the march of time. Memories, both good and bad, that lead us from the past into the present. This building, the State Fairgrounds Coliseum, holds such memories. It was here that one of the most tragic and one of the most joyful events of our time occurred. And Channel 8 was here to witness both.
Indianapolis and Indiana have been shaken by the worst tragedy in their history. An explosion and fire last night at the State Fairgrounds Coliseum has claimed between 65 and 70 lives and left over 335 more injured in 7 area hospitals.
October 31st, 1963. Our television sets flickered into the night with these pictures, bringing us the tragic, shocking conclusion to the opening night of Holiday on Ice.
Chief Phillips, Indianapolis Fire Department. Chief, what's happening right now following this tragedy here?
Well, right at the present time, it's we're getting, we have everybody out that is injured. And, of course, most of the fatalities have all been removed, but now they're removing the rest of this concrete that has quite a bit covered up. And we got to, well, it's all got to be cleaned now because I feel like...
In the final count, 74 people would lose their lives. Many more would be scarred by the worst disaster in Indianapolis history. And for those of us who sat and watched the aftermath on our 17-inch screens, we would lose a little of our innocence.
The old axiom, there's no business like show business, is trite but true. In the early morning hours, the show began. Arriving at Weircook Municipal Airport, the Beatles got their first view of Indiana. The fans, few in number, were shocked that the moment had really arrived. There were the anticipated screams and squeals as the fans caught their first glimpse of the quartet. The security precautions, far more elaborate than when the late President Kennedy visited the same airport, included landing the plane at a little-used section of the field and surrounding it with 60 policemen.
That was the scene at the Indianapolis airport one hot August night almost exactly 20 years ago. The emerging rock group, the Beatles, were on their first U.S. tour, and they were about to fulfill the dreams of Indianapolis area youth with 2 concerts here at the Fairgrounds Coliseum. After what had happened here less than a year before, those Beatles concerts represented a kind of rebirth for this place.
Well, shake it up, baby, now. Shake it up, baby. Twist and shout, twist and shout.
That night before the concert, as the Beatles motorcade headed for the Speedway Hotel, an enterprising Channel 8 photographer was making plans to film the Beatles in concert. Dave Smith remembers.
I don't know to this day exactly how he got in with his camera, but he got in the Coliseum with his camera, got down on his stomach and crawled underneath the seats to the front of the seats as close as he could get to the stage, and lying on his stomach by the front seats, shot up at the stage and got film, exclusive film of the Beatles performing. I'm sure there was no other film taken, like that at the time.
The Beatles gave 2 concerts on their first and last trip to Indianapolis, an exhausting ordeal that would last an entire day, but it was worth it. 26,000 teenage music lovers would see the group that changed the course of rock and roll. A TV show was produced using the film shot by Jim Curtis, the clever Channel 8 photographer who took these pictures. It was called Our Fair Beatles.
George Harrison, Paul McCartney, John Lennon, and Ringo Starr. They came, they saw, they conquered. For some, they'll always be our fair Beatles.
Burger King asks, does a burger fixed to your taste really wet your... Would extra mayo and no ketchup really hit the... Does the thought of no onion but double the pickle make your mouth Would a burger with lettuce and tomato make your taste buds? Don't you think you should have your burger your way? Then come to Burger King. Go someplace else and you're probably missing the...
Kroger salutes Colt Spirit, the strategy, the timing, the execution. Catch the same team spirit at Kroger with these cost-cutter savings.
Cut your cost on the 8-pack of 16-ounce assorted Pepsi products, only $1.68 plus deposit. The 1-pound package of Oscar Mayer all-meat wieners or all-beef Franks, just $1.49 with coupon. And Wilson Continental Deli Cooked Ham, cost-cutter priced only $1.97 a pound.
The winning tradition continues when you go Krogering.
In this whole wide world, there's one spectacular taste you just can't pass up. Pepsi, the choice of a new generation.
The fifth quarter is back for its second season on Wish TV. I'm Ed Harding, and every Friday night join the Channel 8 sports team for the fifth quarter. Expanded to a half hour this year, we'll take you to the sidelines to preview each weekend's major college games, bring you the most complete coverage of high school football, and throughout the National Football League season, we'll follow closely Frank Kush and the Indianapolis Colts, right here on the fifth quarter.
Friday night at 10:30 on Wish TV.
Once again from the Marott Ballroom, a reminder that you are watching a television celebration, 30 years on the air with Channel 8. I'm Mike Ahern.
And I'm Debbie Knox. And this hour, we'll be taking you through our film and tape library to relive some of the TV milestones of the last 3 decades.
Now, we left off with the Beatles, and if my memory serves me correctly, we should be in about the mid-1960s right now.
You know, really, Channel 8 and probably all television stations at that time were facing some of their greatest challenges.
It was a challenge to capture the intense emotions of a very turbulent period in our history, and to do that as accurately as possible. So let's rejoin our journey now back through 30 years of television history at Channel 8.
Round, round, get around, I get around, yeah, get around, round, round, I get around, I get around, round, round, I get around, get around, round, round, I get around.
The world around us in 1963 through 1967 was changing fast. We as Americans had realized the dream of men in space and were committed to putting a man on the moon. Years of suppression of blacks was reaching a boiling point, and the Beatles continued their popularity.
You're getting real well known, yeah, the bad guys know us and they leave us alone. I get around, round, round, I get around. All come to look for America.
This was also when we as a nation would for the first time mourn a fallen president by uniting as we gathered around our television sets.
Where are your eyes that look so mild? Haroo, haroo. Where are your eyes that look so mild? When my poor heart should first be beguiled, Johnny hardly knew you.
Now the trumpet summons us again, not as a call to bear arms, though arms we need, not as a call to battle, though in battle we are, but a call to bear the burden of a long twilight struggle, a struggle against the common enemies of man, tyranny, poverty, disease, and war itself.
With your drums and your drums and your guns, haroo, haroo. With your guns and your drums and your drums and your guns, the enemy nearly slew you.
And so, my fellow Americans,
While the country moved further into the space age, network TV programmers knew that what was popular in life would be just as popular on the tube. Thus did a variety of space-themed shows find their beginnings. TV writers would, of course, add their own twist to reality.
He won't be able to maintain orbit.
Andeye gush bifar mone toem sarvar.
The mid-60s were also when popular shows like Mission Impossible, Bewitched, and Hogan's Heroes made their debut.
The artichokes are not haute cuisine. I may have to change greengrocers. The Chateaubriand.
During this time, Channel 8 continued innovative local programs such as the annual Campus Talent Show. It featured aspiring musicians and was shot on location around the state.
Campus Talent 65, a preview of the stars of the future.
Through the endless nights of winter, your bell of happiness will ring.
I'd come in and see you, baby, but your bad man's gotten me bored. See, rider, see what you got done, Lord.
This show may be the earliest forerunner of today's music videos. In television, there are few original ideas.
See, rider, see what you done. I'm saying, hey.
A tornado struck this section, known as Section 78 of the huge Chrysler Corporation span. This is where Chrysler manufactures parts for...
News reports of this day continue to describe the world around us. In the spring of 1965, the devastation of the Palm Sunday tornadoes would be beamed into our living rooms and show us the human drama of nature unleashed against man.
A huge trash can, battered like a small tin can. This is the scene at the Chrysler plant following the worst tornado in Indiana's history. This is Bob Glenn in Kokomo.
To get the material for this report, Channel 8 personnel drove to the scene, taped the aftermath, and then rushed back to the studio to televise these images even before the shock of the tragedy had fully set in. In that same year, WISH-TV relocated to its present home at 1950 North Meridian Street. The increasing complexity of television and its production needed more space than the old building could offer. So in September of 1965, Channel 8's equipment and people moved up the street to their new state-of-the-art facility.
News is history, the constantly unfolding story of the events that shaped the 60s. Here at CBS News, the electronic facilities of one of the world's foremost news organizations are at work around the clock to bring you an accurate picture of the important events of the day. This constant flow of fresh news is the basis for the many daily CBS News broadcasts. This is Walter Cronkite. You'll see.
In 1967, 5 years after Walter Cronkite first took over the anchor desk at CBS, a youngster in Indianapolis stepped from behind a radio microphone and in front of a television camera.
I'm Mike Ahern, and tonight, here's the way the world looks.
The timing was good. Television news was just coming of age, although there was no way of knowing back then just how far we would travel. Already by 1968, we were the first local station to expand to a full one-hour newscast. Soon, newsroom staffs would double and triple in size. Black and white film cameras would give way to color, then to videotape. Microwave and satellite technology would make news reporting instantaneous. In short, there would be a remarkable revolution in news gathering, one that is still going on. But back then, we thought we were pretty up to date.
Stan Wood, weather before it happens. Jim Wilson, Channel 8 sports director. He gets the stories behind the scores.
And we were going places. My first co-anchor, Rolland Smith.
I'm Rolland Smith, Channel 8 News.
A television reporter goes many places. My latest assignment is Vietnam. Watch Vietnam Reports, 7 and 11 on Channel 8.
As television news improved, so did its ratings. People were watching more of it. That meant sponsors would pay to advertise in a newscast, and that meant TV news, the one-time stepchild of the industry, suddenly was making a profit. And that convinced television promotion departments they should sell those newscasts to the audience. The result... At times, it did seem that our mission was impossible. To turn out almost 3 hours of news every day. When just 20 years ago, Channel 8 was doing all it could to produce a daily 15-minute newscast. And how well has television news met that challenge? A few years ago, my co-anchor at the time, Carol Krause, and I asked Walter Cronkite that question. How successful has TV been in reporting the news over the years?
Oh, I think in general, very successful, particularly in covering the major news stories of the period. The moon landings, assassinations, unfortunately, the riots in the cities, Watergate, the Vietnam War. These things certainly have been well recorded by television.
This fall, Indiana's own Wish TV8 premieres 3 exciting new shows, starting weekday mornings with Every Second Counts.
And welcome to Every Second Counts, where today, 3 lucky couples will try for over $20,000 in cash and prizes.
Hilarious Real People reporter Bill Rafferty is your host for The Fastest.
Dallas. Correct. Fallon. Dynasty. Correct. Blake. Bill. Dynasty. Correct.
The Funniest.
San Fernando Valium. False. Correct.
The winningest new game show on television. Every Second Counts, weekday mornings. Then the excitement continues weeknights at 6:30 on the all-new Jeopardy!
Here is the host of Jeopardy, Mr. Alex Trebek.
Jeopardy, where we supply the answers, and it's up to our players to come through with the questions.
The stakes are high.
Oh, I like that. We've got the Daily Double going for you now. You want to risk all of it or part of it?
I'll risk all of it.
The question is, which game show will you be watching?
Let's play Jeopardy!
Saturday at 5:30 this fall, we'll be putting on the hits like you've never seen before. Actual people lip-sync their way to stardom in national competition.
The fire
Putting on the hits gives amateur entertainers the chance to imitate everyone from John Cougar to Diana Ross. Putting on the hits. That's what we'll be doing with Every Second Counts, Jeopardy, and the brightest new lineup in town. Make Indiana's own the one to watch this fall. Wish TV Channel 8.
The painful, bittersweet years of the late 1960s. America was at war with itself as much as it was with North Vietnam. And through it all, we stared into the screens of our TV sets and witnessed one of the most turbulent periods in our history.
9. Ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2.
But it was also a time of triumph. This turned out to be perhaps the greatest TV spectacle ever produced. Television cameras took us right along with the men taking these historic first steps. This would be a day we would all tell our grandchildren about, when man first walked on the moon.
became indeed for all mankind.
This period of our past also spawned the youthful revolutionaries called hippies or flower children. And in 1969, over 500,000 of them converged on a place called Woodstock. This was a generation who, when rain stopped their concert, would make their own music. The campaign trail of 1968 led hopeful politicians through Indiana as it had in years past, but this time, television was ready to cover their parade as never before. News staffs and technology had evolved since 1964, and viewers in these uneasy times wanted to know more than ever who was running and what they stood for. Our TVs overflowed with promises for an anxious audience.
The need for enlisting the Soviet Union in the side of peace, pointing out, too, that if the Viet Cong will lay down their arms and stop their subversion, that they should be allowed to participate in the political processes. All these things, of course, are not new.
We should not have had the general deferment of college students that was approved, was it 3 years ago, but should have used the lottery.
I look forward to talking not only to the people of Indiana, I looked forward to talking with the people of Indiana.
Indiana Democrats gave Robert Kennedy his first primary victory in 1968. The magic of the Kennedy name and the range of the television cameras combined to make this the most watched primary in recent memory. With TV cameras seemingly everywhere, politicians now understood they could fight their election battles for all the voters to see. When they came to town, it was as much for the show as for the goodwill.
In the streets, the children scream.
The fever of an election year intensified the civil rights movement more than ever. Martin Luther King Jr. and those marching with him knew the country was ready for a change of attitude. No one knew, though, what waited for Reverend King in Memphis that April, when an assassin's bullet would silence his unyielding cry for equality.
They caught the last train for the coast. The day the music died.
Robert Kennedy learned of King's death on his way to campaign in Indianapolis. As he stood in the midst of a black audience in an inner-city neighborhood, he urged them to not seek revenge against whites. Our cameras were there to witness Kennedy's plea for understanding.
Tempted to be filled with hatred and mistrust of the injustice of such an act against all white people. I would only say that I can also feel in my own heart the same kind of feeling. I had a member of my family killed.
Just 5 years after his brother's death,
killed by a white man.
Robert Kennedy's campaign ended as tragically as John's presidency. When the 60s gave way to the 70s, the nation was struggling to put the turmoil of the last decade behind us. Once again, we were on our way to calmer times. By now, the flow of news was unrelenting. So much was happening so fast, the television had to find ways to keep up. Vietnam was called the Television War. A president was nominated, elected, and resigned on TV. Laws were passed.
Will the House come to order?
And fires were fought on television. Our live cameras took us everywhere and gave us dramatic and dangerous stories. Our technology brought us so far, so fast, that we in television news at times must guard against becoming hostages ourselves. A man with a shotgun taught us that lesson 7 years ago. And sometimes the changes can be overwhelming. Just a few weeks ago, after a briefing at the White House, I stood in Washington, D.C. and told my story to a satellite 23,000 miles up. That satellite then beamed my picture and words 23,000 miles down into your living room television sets. And all of that in a split second. We continue to be amazed, even 30 years later. Television shows of the 70s began to mirror American life as it had never done before.
In this day, we were able to laugh at ourselves, and what we saw on the tube reflected what went on in our homes. A little bit of TV reality lived within us all. Television even poked a little fun at itself when Mary Tyler Moore debuted in 1970. The show featured a hometown girl trying to make it big in the caricatured setting of a television newsroom. TV critics claimed the public wouldn't be interested. A few years later, some of those same critics would ask for interviews with a star of this supposedly doomed series.
Hello. Hello.
In 1972, television began reliving the Korean War with the premiere of MASH. For 11 years, this would be one of the nation's most popular pastimes, watching TV's version of a war we had left in the dust of the 1950s. Along with the honesty in 70s television, the form known as jiggle TV came silently sneaking down our antennas. This was not necessarily the girl next door we saw on our screens. For the past hour, we've been looking back over 30 years of broadcast history here at Channel 8, but we feel the next 30 years will be just as exciting. This new set for our newscast is part of that future, and we realize it is merely an external change, but we feel that it's symbolic of where we've been and where we're going. That here at Channel 8, where the first videotape was introduced to local viewers, where the first portable tape cameras were used for news gathering, where the first revolutionary beta cams were pioneered for the entire country, and beginning in mid-September, where the first half-hour local morning newscast will premiere, that here we'll try to build on our past achievements, not rest on them, and that in news, public affairs, and local programming, we'll attempt to be as committed to the future as we are proud of our past. So we're back now where we began about 1 hour ago in the Marott Ballroom, our 30-year journey through television history at Channel 8. And you know, Debbie, it's pretty remarkable when you think that 30 years ago, a lot of people thought that were very skeptical about television.
You know, but you do have some fond memories that you brought out, and my earliest memories probably were sitting in front of the television set watching Captain Kangaroo, but also watching the Friday night fights with my dad, and that was a trivia question. Who was the sponsor of those fights?
Gillette. We all know that, right?
Oh,
Gillette.
you know all
Friday
those
night
things.
fights?
That's great.
What I recall best is standing before an appliance store window in the early 50s, and some little boy with his brother was watching television through the window. Very new then. And his little brother was tugging at him and says, "Come on, Joey." He said, "It's just a fad."
No, not just a fad. Yes.
We're almost out of time, so
yeah.
They say this is going to work, folks, so here we go. Let's try this.
By the way, thanks to the people at the Marott.
So we will have a toast here to 30 years in the past and 30 and more years in the future.
Got the blues for the 50s, miss the early 60s too. I do. Got the blues for the 50s, miss the early 60s too. You know it's true. From the tip of my ducktail to the toe of my blue suede shoes. Turn my collar up, mama, put that cuff back in my jeans. All right. Turn my collar up, mama, put that cuff back in my jeans. You know what I mean? If that ain't enough, mama, shoot my head full of real cream. Well, give me back my church key, let me ride my old dude's crew. Ride on. Give me back to the 50s, miss the early 60s too. You know it's true. From the tip of my ducktail to the toe of my blue suede shoes. Turn my collar up, mama, put that cuff back in my...
Sports Line Sports coming in. I think it's something... See, Sundays on Channel 8 if you want. I don't know. You're gonna...